Oh yeah.
And welcome back to another episode of Charting Life, where we attempt to examine the uncharted territories of life and try to help think more deeply and differently about certain things, and always coming with a healthy dose of laughter. And so far, I have my friend Dustin here from Raising the Wild Ones podcast. Every single time I've had you on or done anything with it, there has been a copious amount of laughter with it. So I'm looking forward to the conversation we've got going on here. In the last episode, if you haven't listened to it, definitely go give it a listen. We covered Philippians chapter 4. There's a verse that says, "Be anxious for nothing," and we explored was that can you ever feel anxious, or is it telling you to not consistently be anxious? And without giving you too much of a spoilers, go over and check that out. And we did this really cool thing called exegeting, which means that we are pulling out treasures from the Bible and not putting things into it. There's a book I have around here somewhere. It's called The Secret, not the bad one, but the treasure hunt one. And if you know what I'm talking about.
All right. Yeah. I know both the books, but continue.
Yep. So Byron Price is he's a puzzle maker basically, and he decided, I'm going to hide all these treasures, these little cask treasure, in 12 different parks in the U.S., and I'm going to give you 12 different cryptic poem clues along with very cryptic images. You got to figure out which poem goes to which image, and then here's all the lore details around it. And we actually there's one in Louisville that is a tribute to Byron Price. He died back in the 80s. By the way, it's since like 84, 85, something like that. Only 3, I think, have been found. There's still 9 that have not been found. That's how good of a puzzle this is. But if anything teaches you how the difference between reading into something, like reading your own opinions into something versus pulling out the details that are there, is one of these puzzles. And I do like to say, when I'm doing an introduction, I'm a treasure hunter, because there is a treasure and I have hunted for this thing and do try to occasionally go back out there. We believe it's in Cherokee Park in Louisville. But anyways, the point is, you have this very cryptic poem, a very cryptic picture, and you can I've been on Facebook groups, and there's probably 1,000+ different possibilities. And every time you turn around, someone says, "I know where to dig," and nobody's found it, which means we're reading into the poem what we think is there, not pulling out from it. And scripture is a lot like that as well. So if we're going to exegete, we're going to pull the treasure from it, and you only know it if you actually find the treasure. So with that,
Yeah.
we're going to cover a really cool a passage of the Bible that is covered a lot, but I think there's some incredible things hidden in there that are wonderful details that is often overlooked. And there's also some really cool, weird stuff around it. This is the Tower of Babel. And Dustin, I know you actually did a episode on your podcast with it. Why don't you give us just a quick little heads up of what that episode was like?
It was weird. We talked about a lot of fringe theories. I won't lie. We discussed a lot of different stuff. We'll probably get into it as well. We also talked about a guy named Nimrod a lot, which we'll probably discuss a little bit here too, because I mean, we'll talk about that later.
Mhm.
But w the thing with the Tower of Babel is, like you talk about, like exegete, is this is one passage that a lot of people want to read a ton of stuff into it and be like, well, I know exactly what the Tower of Babel is. I know exactly what it was used for. I know exactly where it is. I know exactly all of these things, but yet we're still sitting here kind of reading this passage going, well, what is it? How does it work? Where is it?
Mhm.
You know, who built it? How did they build it? Why did they use bricks? The little thing where it's like, it says they made bricks. Why did they use bricks? And so that's a lot of the stuff that we kind of talked about in our podcast. And we talked about like a little bit of like AI stuff too, which was interesting. It was kind of weird, I won't lie, but I kind of like discussing weird stuff sometimes.
Right.
So,
Finding a way to connect Tower of Babel with AI. That's
yeah.
pretty, and not the little tiny town in the Canaan area, which again,
No.
that's a deep cut. If you know, then you've been to Sunday school. So so anyways, yeah, so the Tower of Babel, if you're going to ever, pro tip, if you're going to try to like figure out what the Bible says about something, if you're going to have your guesses, you always want to go to the text itself and actually read it. But first off, just imagine what, like, if you've ever heard about this as a child, especially, I'm thinking like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but a little bit more straight is what I'm thinking. And I'm also thinking, if they're going to build a tower to the heavens, they're going to run out of oxygen. Like, they're going for a literal physical place, is what in my mind was going on, until I did some research and I had to do one of these 20-page papers on a passage in the Old Testament, which is what I did on, because I thought it was such a really cool thing to look at. But let's go ahead and read it. Did you want to read it? Do you have it pulled
Yeah,
up, or do you want me?
I
Okay.
sure can.
So
I
Genesis
got it right
chapter
here.
11, verses 1 through 9.
1 through 9. I got you. So starting in chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. They said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach the heaven, and let us make ourselves a name. Otherwise, we will be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.' The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the men had built. And the Lord said, 'Behold, they are one people, and they have the same language, and this is what they began to do. And now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech.' So the Lord scattered them abroad, and from there over the whole face of the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore the name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language and the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth." So.
All right, that is a mouthful. Thank you very much for
Oh, it
reading
is.
that.
You're welcome.
As a youth pastor, I make sure I always, like, I could stand up there and read the text, but we got a TV screen, and I always have one of the students or multiple ones do it, because if nothing else, I know you're paying attention to the part that you're reading,
You're
or at least have
reading
a
it when it's
higher
right.
suggestion that that's
Yeah.
probably the case. But yes, anyway, so the Tower of Babel is one that I think a lot of people know. The tower part is super fascinating. But I think probably the two takeaways that most people could just tell you right away is either the very tall tower or the confusion of languages. And those are both very important parts of it. But I don't think that's the biggest factor in it. Now, I think there's a couple of clues hidden in there of that as to why the tower might be
Yeah.
significant. Excuse me. But I want to back up a little bit. In our previous episode, towards the end of it, we talked about and we're having a little bit fun with Revelation and how you can, like the book of Revelation, how you can try to start to understand it a little bit better. And one of the things I mentioned is that throughout the Bible, you can see two cities pitted against each other, was Jerusalem versus Babylon, and you'll see them pop up over and over throughout Scripture, especially in Revelation. But what's really interesting is Babel here is the genesis of Babylon. And really, I think the snake in the garden is really where it goes really far back to. And there's debate over whether the city of Babylon is on the location of Babel, or if it was more of a spiritual successor. But regardless, Babel is a very significant place. And one of the things that's really important is Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. God is giving the command right after Noah gets out of the ark to fill the earth and multiply, basically, go fill out the earth. And here, one of their problem wasn't congregating into a city necessarily, because if you're going to fill the earth, you have to congregate somewhere. So that doesn't seem like it's a problem as much as it is them actually saying, hey, you know what, let's stop here, let's build a tower to the heavens, let's make a name for ourselves just so we don't have to follow what God wanted us to do. Is very, very
Yeah.
stubborn, and say, hey, we want our way is better than God's way, which again, this is why I think it goes back to the serpent in the garden as well, as far as that mentality. But there's also a lot of really cool things. There's things about the tower types. I know, like we said, I've seen cartoons and images when I was younger about this building so high, and even when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, like in Sunday school, hearing these stories, I'm like, there's a reason they didn't build the tower and complete it, because they couldn't breathe, because they were able to get so high in the sky. But there's actually a part in here that looks like they actually built the tower and completed it. They just didn't complete the city. Just looking at the text, it looks like that might be the case. But before I get into anything else, is there any other maybe thoughts, Dustin, that were um, you know things that you maybe thought of going into the text that might go a little bit beyond what the text says? Maybe a preconceived thoughts.
You talk about like preconceived thoughts and stuff like that, kind of what I have, I guess, coming towards the text, looking at it. The two things that really kind of like stand out in this text for me, and as weird it is, maybe it's because I'm a builder, but it says they made bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of came to the idea of they stopped and thought regular construction methods aren't good enough we've got
Hmm.
to figure out something else. And so that's an interesting thing, kind of a tidbit we could dig a little deeper on. But
Yeah.
also kind of the idea you talked about, the idea of congregating. Like it's not necessarily bad to just congregate because it's good to have like a home base. Like you want a home base and then you can go out and plant this city and then you can go out and plant this city and you can
Hmm.
go out and plant that city. But it's the idea of the open rebellion against God. And it's almost the idea of, at least for us, when we look at this, it's this open rebellion against God so soon, at least for what we think, after Noah's flood. And it's
Hmm.
like, we're not too many years after Noah's flood. I mean, we're a lot farther than you think, but it's just kind of like when we're just here in chapter 11. I mean, Noah's flood was just back in chapter 6, and it's like
Hmm.
we're not that far into the, Old Testament, into Genesis, and they're trying to do it again, and
Right.
it's like okay. And so it kind of almost makes you think what else is going on kind of behind the scenes that may have led to this, or so on and so forth, which that's getting into some, that's kind of reading into the scripture a little bit and maybe kind of
Yeah.
reading into some other extra biblical material as well too. But
Yeah.
that's kind of some of the things that I
Mhm.
think about coming to a lot of these Old Testament passages.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm thinking, so especially over the last 200 years, there's been a lot of scholarly debate over a number of things that have been traditionally held. Sometimes that's for good. Sometimes that's a little bit more. It might seem a little bit on the needless side of things. If you've studied things, like, okay, why did you guys ever debate this part? This just, but but one of the things, it's widely accepted that Moses is the author um, of the Pentateuch. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So first 5 books of the Bible, Moses is the author. Now, chapters 1 through 11 is kind of this primordial story. I think that might be the proper term, but basically, everything before Abraham is a much older story that is being told and finally written down. So, the original
Yeah.
audience, if you take Moses as the author, which I do, I think there's plenty enough scholarship to suggest that not only traditionally, but also logically, that it makes sense that Moses is the author. The original audience would have been the Israelites who've escaped Egypt and they're in the wilderness, ready and anticipating to go into the promised land. And so now they're being told these stories, and this is all a prequel for, like, a better prequel than Star Wars prequel, but this is all a prequel for the real
Hey,
for the
hey, some of those were good. I won't lie.
some
I
of them
kind
were
of
good.
liked episode 3. All right. I
Yeah.
liked episode
Okay.
3.
I didn't hate Jar Jar as much as everyone else did, but not that he was
Yeah.
amazing, but I didn't. He did the job of being a comedic relief, and I enjoyed that.
You sure
But
he's not a Sith Lord? I'm just throwing that out
I know
there.
I've seen some of the stuff where it looks like just maybe. But the Genesis 1 through 11 is a prequel for Israel before they were going into the promised land. Before, so even before we say, hey, Abraham is being set apart, uh, so we have these stories, and so the Tower of Babel is one of these kinds of stories, and so to try your best to get yourself into the mindset of somebody who's hearing this, try to put yourself in the sandals, the dirty, nasty sandals of somebody who's in the wilderness between Egypt and between Canaan. And the preacher in me wants to just go ahead and start, between Egypt and Canaan, and you can, something or another. Uh,
Really tired of eating, some
yeah,
manna that's on the ground
yeah,
and quail.
right. Yeah, sometimes I read the Old Testament and I'm like, man, did you guys really just not know how good you have it? And then God's really good at reminding me. He's like, don't you realize that you have it pretty good too? Yes.
Yes, I am.
uh,
I know. I complain about lesser things.
right. But there's a couple of clues I think are really interesting, which can set up this whole idea of Babel being kind of like Babylon. It's really the heart and mindset of what's going on. What leads you to build a as a temple or a tower like this? And I want to get to what we believe, or what I believe that you and I think about what the tower is. But I think just we're doing some really good setup here. So in verse 2 it says, "As the people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar." Now, anytime there is like this eastward movement that you see in scripture would be especially in the Old Testament, it's basically talking about leaving Eden. Because when Adam and Eve, when they were kicked out of the garden, there's always like this eastward momentum and movement. And so if you're getting real technical, where they would have migrated would have been more of like a south-ish, southeast, geographically. But the reason that the author went with the word east was trying to give you a really good narrative clue that this is what they're going for. So for us, if we hear a story that starts with, it's a dark and stormy night, we know that something bad's going to happen. And so
Yeah.
when they hear, people, their people, or whoever the main characters are, they're traveling to the east or from the east. Um, that means that something there is some rebellion against God going on here. So that's a very important thing to mention. And I do like how you mentioned the bricks and burning them and building with a mortar and all that sort of stuff, because that does speak to human ingenuity too. And that speaks to the idea of ambition. And ambition is fine on its own, but what you do with that ambition is problematic. So
Well, what's
go
the
ahead.
proverb? There's a proverb that says, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the
Yes.
glory of kings to seek it out.
Yeah.
It,
I
it,
love
it
that.
doesn't mean it's bad for us to try to figure out new techniques and new ways to do things. It's in our nature to do so.
Mhm.
It's just I love that verse too. I've got it
Yeah.
written around somewhere in Proverbs. I'm good at quoting verses and the
Yeah.
book where it's from. Where
That
it's at inside that book,
Yeah.
you know,
That one,
you're
that
great.
one I can almost, I always have to Google it to find it. One of my other favorite proverbs is he who blesses his neighbor with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as cursing. So basically you say nice things at a very early age or a very early time in the day.
What's that
You
mean
know,
about roosters, man?
yeah.
Roosters, like, they're really annoying and loud first thing in the
Mhm.
morning.
Yeah,
Who
I'm
knows?
sure the roosters have been the recipient of so many nasty words to how they were waking up.
Oh yeah.
But doing some research here, who do I have it here as? Paul Seeley has done some interesting work on this, but it looks like he's trying to find the date of the Tower of Babel, and it looks like it's somewhere between 3,500 to 2,400 BC. So that would, that actually fits in a relatively traditional dating, because I know sometimes we have debates over how old is the Earth, that sort of thing. But within a traditional dating period, it looks like that's roughly what we're looking at is the 3,500 to 2,400. And a lot of the ziggurats were built. Oh, let me, by the way, I happen to think that the type of tower is called a ziggurat. Do you have any thoughts on that? I can see you doing the
Well,
smile and shake your head there.
oh no, I was looking towards, let me talk about like ziggurats
Mhm.
is we see those all through just any ancient civilization trying to figure out how they can get to God or make things that
Mhm.
can get them closer to God. We see that through Greek mythology. I mean, where did Zeus and Athena and all those guys hang out with? They hung out on Mount Olympus. They hung out
Mhm.
somewhere up tall, really high. So it's like ziggurats basically people throughout history would build these things in an attempt to get to God. Now, what that was, I mean, in our mind, it's like tall tower. We can climb up there.
Mhm.
You could really get into the idea of it could have been something completely different. It could have been some kind of an access point or something like that. I mean, because even you could go all the way back to the garden of when God shut up the garden, he said he put angels with flaming swords to guard the entrance.
Mhm.
It's like, well, okay, well, there's an access point to the garden right there. So that
Yeah.
means totally weird theory out here. Weird theory alert from Dustin. That means if somebody ever found the Garden of Eden, they probably didn't make it back. Just saying.
Right.
So if Dustin ever goes lost searching somewhere, some way, shape, or form, and you're like, hey, I wonder where that Dustin guy is. Maybe I found the Garden of Eden, or maybe I fell in a sand trap and I just didn't make it out.
Yeah. Or like Indiana Jones, maybe he ran away from a boulder, just not fast enough.
I'm just not fast enough. Definitely wouldn't be fast enough. I would get squished by the
I,
boulder.
I would too. I would become the boulder. I have I'm doing better. I'm losing some weight, but I do have more of the rounder belly. And I've said, I would love to make a shirt where it's like it looks like a rock, basically, like just kind of crumpled up like rock looking for the right on the belly side of the shirt with like Indiana Jones, like a little tiny like running away on this.
Running away from the belly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. That's a good
Oh
one.
man. Or sometimes I feel like that guy in was it Jesus Freak? There's a man with a tat on his
Oh,
belly wiggled around like
jiggled around like marmalade jelly.
yep. All
Yeah.
right. So moving on back to the to the text here and what this idea of a ziggurat, and you're talking about people trying to reach heaven or God in some way. And it's interesting. Like true atheism is a very brand new concept in all of human history. We've always accepted that there was some type of entity, divinity, God, or something out there, whether it's God, aliens, demons, giants, Nephilim, what you name it. Like there's always some kind of higher being that we've always recognized. Now we've also, as humans, have always contended with that and wanted to earn our spot there, although the Bible is very clear and tells a wonderful story about how you can't earn your spot there. But these jokers over at Babel tried to do that. And so this idea of a ziggurat is a it's kind of like a pyramid, but without exact slopes. It's more like a tiered, um,
Yeah.
think of like a tiered birthday cake or wedding cake, 2 or 3 tiers high, that sort of thing. And it would have had plenty of different uses, but the top two, or kind of the part was more important. So in many of them, of what we've been able to find, I think there's one of the documents I was able to get who the document I'm looking at is the Mesopotamian background of the Tower of Babel, according or account and its implications. But it looks like there's 22 roughly ziggurats that's been found. Most all but 6 of those were able to find the title or inscription of what it was called, and almost all of them, or I think all the ones that have names to it, have been identified as a temple of some sort. And so the next to top, so the second from the top would be possibly a residence or governing place of priests or kings, that sort of thing. But then the top one would be kind of like a divining rod or lightning rod for the gods, is what they were basically, the idea of trying to bring the gods down to earth. Now, some of them there you would actually have the king or whoever was the perhaps a priest as well, some authority in the city. They would try to put that as their dwelling places up in the heavens, in the place that was supposed to connect to heaven in some way, and essentially put themselves in that seat. I think you had a different term for it other than lightning rod for it, but what were your thoughts? I guess any other thoughts on ziggurats, so we can
Well,
explore that.
one more thing to kind of toss in about ziggurats is they're not
Sure thing.
just found in the Middle East either. I
Mhm.
mean, there's ziggurats that are found in Mexico, I want to
Yeah.
say, and there's ziggurats that are found in South America,
Mhm.
and so it really kind of gives this idea to where are these thoughts coming from? And it's like I've heard the term lately. I was been doing some research on some kind of different topics, and one of the guys I was listening to was talking about something called the collective unconscious. And so it's like this something
Mhm.
that we all have, this collected memory that came from somewhere. So that's why they're building all these things. And it's like, well, we can just make our own things. We're just making our own memories. It's like, or the fact is that human civilization has come from this sort of things, and that's why there's
Mhm.
ziggurats found everywhere. Can
Right.
almost be traced back to this kind of Tower of Babel situation here, because they're like, well, we built one there, right? That one didn't
Mhm.
work. Let's try it over here.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see this not necessarily just in one location, but you see this in multiple locations. And you really want to get into some really like funky stuff, is you got a lot, some ziggurats can be built on top of what they call like megalithic type structures,
Mhm.
where are in some ways could be said that they are pre-flood structures, which is a whole nother kind of like level. I'm thinking really the one that really stands out to me is like Machu Picchu, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like they've got a city that has been built on top of this like really finely hewn stone. And it's like the stone's different, but the city's newer. And I mean, there's a lot of different levels talking about ziggurats that you could really just kind of like jump into.
Mhm.
And even, do you want me to say the word that I said earlier? I could
Yes,
say the
please
word that I
do.
said earlier.
Yeah.
Ziggurats, in essence, could totally be stargates right there. I just totally said that. I said
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And sometimes in our modern sensibilities, it seems like, well, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Why would people believe that? Well, they're just uneducated, you know, nimrods, or maybe they did actually know something, and who knows how, what was going on there. But one thing I think we could say is the ancient people were not idiots. Like
Yeah.
they granted, we have different technology, we have different access to knowledge than what they had, but that doesn't mean that they were just um really dumb people. One example I would say is, I heard this from Professor John Lennox, Lennox. If anyone wants to look him up, he's basically the guy like C.S. Lewis who's still alive. He reminds me very much of C.S. Lewis, but he was I think debating some like Richard Dawkins or Hitchens, or one of the new atheist people from a couple decades ago, and they were talking about kind of the fallacy of, well, they were just backwoods hicks who didn't really know all that much. And his response was, Joseph was going to divorce Mary because he knew where babies come from. It's the
Yeah.
fact that
Oh yeah.
Mary had this claim that the Holy Spirit did this and gave her the baby. That's the crazy claim, not the fact that like he didn't like that. he didn't divorce Mary or did not, keep with Mary because, oh, maybe it is God, or because we don't know where babies come from. Like they knew where it came from, and
They knew how that worked. Yeah.
they knew a thing or two. You, by the way, you're a product of people throughout all of history knowing how that works. Uh,
Knowing how that works. Yeah. Well,
uh, Go
I
ahead.
mean, it's even interesting kind of jumping back about, the ancients and stuff like that not being just complete and total dill weeds. I don't know why I use that word, but it's a fun one.
I like it. I like it.
But it's like, I mean, when you go, I heard a professor, I think it was a pastor, tell me one time, when you look for evil, you're going to find evil. And so it's like they're building these structures and they're making contact with something. And so like this is where the majority of the world kind of goes ancient aliens, right? They're like, "Oh,
Right.
what are they making contact with?" And I'll tell you right now, they're making contact with demons, man. They're making contact with, unsavory dudes in the spiritual world. That's a better way
Yeah.
of saying demons. I'm going to use that one now.
I
Next
like
time
that.
I
Yeah.
preach,
Yeah.
but it's like, and so you sit there and you think about why did they spend all this time? It's like, well, maybe they made contact with an entity, a demonic entity that's giving them some kind of quote unquote secret knowledge. Eh, And it's like, that's why they're continuing to kind of work through these things is because they've sought out evil and evil has decided to talk back in
Yeah.
essence, you
Well,
know.
and that I want to read, I guess, a couple of the ziggurats that have been found, and especially kind of over in that general region, and some of the names that they were able to inscribe. That kind of gives you a little bit of what people were looking for. So the one in Babylon actually says Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. Another place called Borsippa. So if you're from there, let me know, or if you know what that is or how to pronounce it, let me know. The other, so this one's called Temple of the Wielder of the Seven Decrees of Heaven and Earth. Temple of the Mountain Breeze, which sounds like a beverage. Temple of Mystery. Temple of the Stairway to Pure Heaven. And a couple other deities that are mentioned as well. Temple of the Admirable Throne or Sanctuary. Exalted Splendor, Exalted Mountain. The God Nana. So you're only supposed to call your grandma grandma. You don't call her Nana. Or you're
Not
calling her
Nana.
God.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Darn.
And then
Totally
another
messed
one.
that one up.
Yeah. Um, let's see here. There's two more I think are interesting. One at a place called Dilbat, uh, which is cousins to Dillweed, is
Dillweed. Yep.
yeah, Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. And then the one in a place called Larsa is Temple which links heaven and earth. So you get all of these and you start to get a picture of what it is that they're trying to do. They're trying to connect with the divine, whether they want to become that or they're wanting to restore what was lost in Eden. And I think, regardless of what their intention is, I think like ultimately what their hearts, I think that's what where people are trying to get to is to restore what was lost, but doing it in some unsavory and unhelpful, very negative ways. And that's why, again, I think that is significant of what we see in the garden, then we see here in Babel, and then throughout Babylon, throughout the text of scripture, we can see how Babylon is a lot of me focused. It's me elevating myself to this place of God or kind of earning my way upwards. And with that does come innovation. And look, I like innovation. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I like the fact that insulin exists. I've been able to live long enough to have a wife and child. So, very happy about that. But we also have to be careful that, with all this, we can also come the pride and the hubris of naming yourself God in some way or another.
Yeah.
Even though we might be a little bit more clever in how we do it, we still kind of build these ziggurats of our own selves today. So, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you're right on to something. I mean, a ziggurat for us can look completely and totally different than actually going out in my. I'm gonna go out in my backyard later, and I'm gonna build a ziggurat. I've got about
Yeah.
7 acres. I could build a step pyramid out back there,
I mean,
right?
for camp, if you did that something like that for camp as a great object lesson, just don't make it Wicker Man type stuff where you burn on
I
catch
was
on
gonna say I
fire.
was thinking like more of a wreck game. Like you have the
Yeah.
kids
Okay.
like grab the brick and then they run
Mhm.
across the field, and the first one to build the ziggurat wins or loses.
Okay.
Maybe
Pool noodle. You know what?
loses.
Do pool noodles.
Yeah,
Um,
pool noodle.
let's get 1,000 pool noodles and make it like a Mr. Beast game.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it really kind of makes you look inward into yourself, and it's like, what are you putting up on that pedestal yourself? What are you trying to set above God yourself? Whether that's, I mean, the classic little things, the small things that you can make ziggurats in your own life that are like, man, I've placed this before God, or even like the bigger ones. Like one of the things that I've had to learn in some way, maybe the hard way, is even like good things can be placed before God in your
Mhm.
life, and it's like, because I'll kind of say this. I went on a mission trip to Cuba, and looking back on that time, other people told me I should go on to this mission trip. Was that mission trip great? Yes. Did good things happen? Absolutely. Was Dustin called to go on that mission trip? I don't really know if I was, and it's like
Yeah.
it kind of makes you sit there and examine all the things, even good and bad in your own life, and be like, what are you placing upon that pedestal on that ziggurat that's placing something in between you and God, you know? And which is really a really neat perspective, kind of even looking at these Old Testament, because it kind of brings back to the whole idea of hanging out in the wilderness, getting ready to go in the promised land, and this story's getting told. It's kind of like, hey, are there things that we need to not be ziggurats in our lives
Mhm.
as we go into the promised land?
Yep.
It kind of makes you think about what is being conveyed in this point here as it's being
Well,
preached.
yeah, and to get into the little nerdy side of of like the Levitical law and all that, they were supposed to say, hey, look, if you're there were certain rules about building an altar to the Lord and not supposed to be done out of cut stone. Like it has to
Mm.
basically, it's got to be a natural thing that you're finding if you're going to build an altar, and you're not supposed to be able to put steps on it, which again goes right in line with this idea of a ziggurat. And if I'm pronouncing it wrong, I don't care. I'm having fun with it. um, but yeah, it goes kind of right in line with that. Which again, with the contextual history, to me, which it tells me that the Tower of Babel was indeed a kind of ziggurat. So if it's ever found one day, that would be pretty cool. But will understand even more of what in the world this is about here. But it also reminds me. At least I'm trying to pull it up. Romans here. Okay, here we go. And see if this doesn't kind of match what we're talking about. Romans 6, chapter 10, verse 6 says, but the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you. The word is near you in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith we proclaim. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Now, after this discussion about the Tower of Babel, that comes really to life in a whole
Yeah,
new way for me. I think it is that because I've always, well, who said they're going to actually go to heaven and bring Christ down? Who said they're going to go down to the pit or down to the hell to bring him up? And it's like, oh, okay. If we know our history, that starts to make sense. That's the attitude that people felt like they could achieve.
they
And
could do. Yeah.
yeah, and I would say if there is a sin kind of sin or attitude that's that ancient, we got to be pretty arrogant to think if we're not going to fall to that too, or not be tempted or swayed in that way. So, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, even you kind of talked about the idea of atheism running so rampant in our
Mm-hmm.
world today, but even atheism at its core is not the fact that there is no God out there. It's that we're making ourselves the God that we worship.
Mm-hmm.
And so even along those lines, it's like it's the idea of, well, we can go down and we can take Jesus' spot because I can be my own God. It's fine. I can handle that.
Mm-hmm.
I can take care of it. And in the same it's I don't want to say the same sin, but it looks different. But in a lot of different ways, it can be. It's just almost I don't want to say the evolution of sin because it's not like sin evolves and gets
Mm-hmm.
different, but it just might look slightly different here than it might look slightly different there.
Right.
It's kind of going back to a spiritual warfare side of it. It's like different tactics. The evil one's trying to run different tactics, running a different play. That's a good one. I like that one. That's
Okay.
I, I really talked my way into that analogy right there. I'll say that. But it's like he's running a different play. It's the same game, it's the same deal, but he's running a different play to see if this one's going to work. It ultimately is going to have the same problems, but
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know, just looks
Yeah.
different with our cultural context.
Yeah. And that's where it's also good to be gracious to each other too, because especially when it comes to sin, like I don't know what your struggle is, you may not know my struggle, and if I'm strong where you're weak, and you're strong where I'm weak, oh man, that means we're both better than each other, which
Yeah.
doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, so like like I said, it's if the ring tempted everyone, it's surely going to tempt Frodo too, right? Uh,
exactly.
yep. So I'm trying to think here. Do you have any other thoughts on the Ziggurat? Any other wild out there theories too? 'Cause I know with your podcast, that's definitely something you guys
There's
like
a
to go into.
there's two or three different things. Well, kind of one thing that we did talk about a little bit here, which is interesting, is when you look at the idea of verse 7 in chapter 11, it says, "Let us go down there and confuse their language, so that they will not understand another speech." That
Mm-hmm.
"let us" right there is an idea that talks about more of, what do they call it, the council, godly
Divine
council,
counsel, that sort of thing.
divine
Yeah.
council worldview and stuff like that. And one of the things I've been trying to do a lot in the Old Testament is, we had a guy on our podcast. His name was Joel Justice, and he's a Hebrew professor, and he's actually a friend of mine. And so me and him talk. He
Mm-hmm.
lives in the same town. We talk quite regularly. But he says, when you're looking at ancient, Hebrew writings, and you're looking at the Old Testament, it's really easy for the modern reader to just read Jesus directly into that. But then when you
Mm-hmm.
take a look at the, old reader and the ancient reader, they're not going to read Jesus into that, because Jesus wasn't a part of their equation. Was it a part of
Right.
God's equation? Absolutely. When God's writing this, God knew about Jesus. When all this was
Mm-hmm.
happening, God knew about Jesus, but it wasn't the ancient reader, their perspective on it. And so it's like, it's an interesting thought when you come into this, because, we think, well, Jesus is going to conquer all things. It's like, when we think about the ancient reader, how are they thinking God's going to conquer things or take care
Mm-hmm.
of this, and kind of the divine counsel? How does that kind of play into the Old Testament and kind of look at there? And so that's kind of one of the things that I kind of thought about looking through this. Is it's another little section of the divine council. Also, another kind of side note we talked about a little bit too was Nimrod, because it talks about the plains
Yes.
of
Yeah.
Shinar.
Which is
And
and
it,
like today when I hear insult or Nimrod, we think of an insult, but I don't. That was not an insult at that time, at least.
yeah. Well, I mean, it says that he was a mighty hunter before the
Hmm.
Lord, and that's in chapter 10. That's just before
Yep.
this in chapter 10. It says that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. I've heard a couple different side notes on that might not have necessarily been a good thing.
Oh,
Like, if
okay. So
someone says Dustin's a mighty hunter. It's like, yep, I bagged the big one last year. I got a good deer. I'm a mighty hunter. And I've heard multiple different commentaries that say, yep, that's a good thing. That means he's a good hunter. Some things says that's he's a mighty hunter before the Lord, like taking those two phrases separately. Joel
hmm,
was actually the one, I think, telling me, and we were talking about that one a little bit in Hebrew, of the idea of it might not have been, quote unquote, a great thing to be a mighty hunter
okay.
before the Lord.
Yeah.
And so it's just a little different trying to think about, is like, what happened to this Nimrod guy? Was he the guy that charged building the Tower of Babel? I mean, it says he was the Lord over the plain of
Mhm.
Shinar. Was he there?
Right.
Was he the dude living at the top of that thing? It's just
Yeah.
a lot of different things coming into this passage to look at and to think about, you know.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is very interesting. So sometimes I've seen people ask, is God funny or is there humor in the Bible? And unfortunately, you're not going to run into a lot of dad jokes, at least not in English. Although that would be great if there, I mean, if God
Wait,
gave us just
hold up.
one tiny book. Go ahead.
Was it which one? Was it Elisha or Elijah that said, your God's using the restroom? That's a good joke.
That was amazing. Yeah. Is your God, maybe he's
Okay.
on vacation, maybe he's using the restroom.
He's using
Yeah.
the restroom. Oh
Yeah.
man, your
Okay. Yeah.
God's using the
That
restroom.
that's yeah. Pray harder. Uh,
Classic. That's a
um,
good old one right there.
oh yeah. First Kings 17, I think. Go have fun and read that. But anyways, but as far as humor in the Bible, some of it is you got to understand the context a lot better. And you mentioned verse 7 is that let us go down there. I want you to imagine this for a minute, okay? These people are trying to build a tower to heaven, whether it's a Stargate lightning rod or whether it's they're trying to go. It was not a short tower; it was a tall one, right? And they want the gods to see it, or they want God, Yahweh, or whoever, however they're calling God. They want God to see this from heaven. But the term "go down" is I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Yarad, like yeah, that's rad or something. I don't know, but basically it means like to go down or to look. And so, in the comedy here is, in order for God to even see this magnificent tower they built, God had to like really lean in and really stretch in just to actually see this tiny little tower. That's cute.
Oh, that's
That's adorable. That so like even with all of man's might, the best they can get is that's adorable. from
That's
from
adorable.
God. Like, let me get down there and see. Oh, okay, I see what you're talking about. You put
Ah,
those two Lego pieces together. How awesome!
that's cool. You dug a
Yeah,
hole in the sand and you
yeah,
combined the
yeah.
two and made a bridge. Good job.
And yeah, and there are so many things like that in the Bible. If you know what to do, if you know how to read it or kind of understand these sort of things, you could definitely see the humor. But there's one other thing I wanted to point out here, because sometimes people get a little um, confused about God. They think that what's happening here is the man is doing something amazing and God's getting a little intimidated or scared. Well, for one, let us go down there is no, God's not that intimidated. But it does say, let's see here, this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will be impossible for them. And so that's where people tend to think that God might be a little nervous of what they can do. But the term beginning, which love to get your friend Joe to pronounce this right, but chalal or halal or something like that. Basically, it means to profane or to begin to profane. And so, in the history of this, you have the Garden of Eden. There's profanity there. There's the breaking of God's commandments there. Then you have the flood, where the earth was significantly profaned, and now you have this here, and God's like, they're doing it again. I'm giving them another choice, and they're doing it again. So God's coming down is going to split the language and completely to do there. And so, um, yeah. So, anyways, that idea of beginning is not just it's not this triumphant thing of what humanity can achieve. It's like, yeah, you can achieve something, but it's not. Was a Wolverine quote? I think I'm the best at what I do, but what I do isn't very good. Um,
Yeah.
Something like that, and that's what unchecked and not caring for not putting God first. That is definitely where we can find ourselves. I had to write this big exegetical paper on the Tower of Babel once, and this, especially verses 3 and 4, the little subtitle I have of that is "Whose temple is this?" And again, that just goes back to who is at the top of that. Whether you're going to call your life a ziggurat or not, who's at the very top? Is that going to be you? Is that going to be God? Or is it going to be something else? Other things that you're putting up there. And again, feel like I'm slipping right on into youth pastor talk. Is like, is your girlfriend or your
Is your
boyfriend
girlfriend
more important to
just
you
just
than God?
say it, say it, just say it, just say it. Is your girlfriend a ziggurat? Come on, man, just say
Yes, yes.
it. Is your
And then suddenly they're
girlfriend a
checking their faces
ziggurat?
for zits. Yeah.
Yeah. Zitterat.
Zitterot. Yeah. Oh man. So I know we probably go a couple of other different ways with this, but I want to kind of return back to the the youth pastor test. Being very quick. Do you need a second to kind of think about your 30
Uh,
seconds to 1 minute
See, I I
Devo?
had kind of a precursor with the other one, so I've been somewhat thinking about it for a
Yeah.
little bit here. So I may be ready to go.
All right.
So
Whenever you're ready, um, we'll go for it, and I'll try to finish it out.
So, all right, kind of where I would start here is you got to really kind of think about and examine yourself because we all have a Tower of Babel in our life somewhere. We all have something that is dangerously close to just taking the place of God, whether that's, going to work, whether that's this or whether that's that and that's the other. And the whole process is we need to make sure that we can check that and focus on God instead of letting that become the ultimate idol or the ultimate ziggurat in our life and making sure that we don't have to make God look down upon us and go, "Oh, your little problem, little thing, that's what you're placing before me. Like that little thing is what you're placing before me." Because in all honesty, we serve an almighty, awesome God that can handle and take care of everything, that there's no reason that we should be having a ziggurat or some sort of idol before the almighty that we do serve.
All right. Wow. That was uh that was actually that was really good.
Yes.
Yeah, so for me, let's see if I can um here we go. Have you ever had a really good idea? Like just one of the fantastic idea. Like don't anybody stop me. I've got this wonderful idea. I know I have, but so did the people here at the Tower of Babel. They had this brilliant idea. We're going to build this tower. We're going to do this, all these wonderful things. We're going to work hard, but we're also going to do it in a way we're going to just completely ignore what God wants us to do. God has these rules. I'm going to do the exact opposite because I'm smarter. I know what I'm doing. And I think if we're honest, we do the same thing more often than not. And we build these towers to ourselves or put other things at the top of this kind of tower on this pedestal above God. And there's some rules or some things, ideas we may have that are really great if we put God first. But as long as we're putting God second or not at all, then even our best ideas are just these tiny little playthings of a tower. All
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
that's
So
a good
that
one.
that was really fun. I really enjoyed doing that on both the last episode and on
Yeah,
this one here.
I
So
did too. I did too.
yeah. Do you have any closing final thoughts here? I know we've been going for a little while, but I always want to give you
Uh,
another
I
chance.
mean, no, no, not necessarily. It's it's interesting to take a look these passages and just kind of
Mhm,
stop and maybe not necessarily think of, man, what do I want out of this passage? But
mhm,
even approach every passage with what does God want me to have out of this passage? What did God want the ancient readers, to
mhm,
understand? How did the whole system work? Not necessarily just, okay, God, what do I get out of this passage? But what does everybody get out of this passage?
mhm.
And how did that look for everybody? And that's why I like looking at Old Testament and even in the Greek, because it's kind of digging into the ancient reader and kind of almost seeing how they thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I can't, say enough context. If you're going to look at scripture, context is very important. It's funny. I was talking with somebody in a previous episode about context, and he was talking about that as well. The importance of context, and his what he was taught was if you take the text out of context, now you just have con, and now you're a con man. And I think that was
It
brilliant.
was a good one.
But what was even funnier about that is like I ran it through one of the clip generator programs, and it was throwing out the subtitles, but it said corn man, which has its own, like corn and corn man, which has its own extra implications accidentally in our current stuff. It's like, no, it's just,
Yeah.
it's con. But again, the text said corn multiple times when he was trying to say con because he has a bit of an accent. And so I just realized, like, that's a brilliant example of you need to read context, because if you're listening to the whole thing, you can realize he's not saying corn, the vegetable, at all. Is corn a vegetable? I don't know. Technically, I think it's a bean, technically, a legume. Anyways,
I I
but
don't know.
somebody please fact check me on that one
Yeah.
because I want to be right. I like being right. But anyways, again, if you watch the whole thing, you realize he's talking about con, not corn, and there's definitely things you can pick up if you're reading context. So, but with that, I feel like I'm probably starting to kind of drift off with stuff. So let's go ahead and drift off to sleep here or awake or whatever you're doing. Again, thank you for listening to Charting Life podcast. We've definitely got some more interesting episodes coming up. Um, yeah, do the like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And again, if this made you laugh, if it made you think more deeply about something, then go ahead and hopefully I earned the like and subscribe. So go ahead and do those. See us over on Facebook, that sort of thing. It'll be helpful to engage with that and share this episode with anybody who this brought to mind. If you have a pastor, a youth pastor, old youth pastor, send this to them. Somebody who, I don't know, your old school bully too, if you need to send that to them. And also go make sure you
Threw the bully back in
do
there
the
again. You
bully
gotta
thing.
send it to your bully.
Had to give it a shot. But definitely go over to Dustin's podcast, Raising the Wild Ones, as well, and give them a listen because they are always a delight to listen to as well. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much, my friend.